everyone, it's Raghu and I'm back. And I'm back with John Lockley. And we were just talking about when we started doing podcasts, almost 10 years ago. And we're just finishing up our 10-year anniversary, actually. So welcome, John. It's been a while.
Thanks, Raghu. It's great to see you. It's good to be here.
John is a shaman from South Africa. And actually, first of all, John has this beautiful scene, this picture behind him. So if you're on YouTube, you can see it. It's worth going to see. Where's it? It's from Botswana, you just told me, but where?
The Okavango Delta. It's one of the 7 jewels of Africa.
Oh, really? Never heard that. Which is?
Okavango Delta is in Botswana.
And how is it? How long is it? I mean, it's a obviously very big body. It looks like to me, anyhow, body of water.
Yeah. So the Okavango Delta kind of increases every year exponentially with the floods, and then it moves down from Botswana into Southern Africa or South Africa, and it's quite a incredible body of water that sustains so much life. The elephants and all the wildlife that you see in Botswana. This water, this basin of water, sustains all of that life. So it's really incredible to experience it and to be there.
And by the way, you can be there. You who are listening, who want to take a really exotic journey, John does them. And we're going to give John's URL at the end, and you can inquire. But, right, you're doing retreats down there somewhere?
Yes, I do my retreats every year. It's called the Dreams and Tracking in the Kalahari. So it's 7 days focused retreats in the Kalahari where people learn indigenous skills, African skills, shamanic skills to do with ancestors, plant medicine, and also tracking, animal tracking. And then we also go to the Okavango Delta and we carry on that experience of observing the animals and tracking and listening to the sounds of the lions roaring at night.
I had an experience like that in East Africa on a safari before I even went to India. And it's uncanny what you hear at night. I mean, it's just extraordinary, the sounds. Okay, so everybody, I mean, John and I have done a number of podcasts, so I'm sure people do remember, but we also have many new listeners. And so John is an elder in the Sangoma tradition as part of the Xhosa. I could never say this the way it's supposed to be. Xhosa tribe.
Xhosa.
But I can't get that click. That's the thing. But this, he's been doing this for 30 years. Tell us this latest news, which you mentioned to me, about what you've gone through as part of a ceremony as an elder.
Yes, so when I emailed you, I just shared that I was made an elder in the Xhosa Sangoma tradition last year. And to be made an elder is about not necessarily turning 60, but it's about attainment in terms of your dreams and the ancestors giving you this title of eldership. And so I had a number of dreams over the last few years, and my Xhosa teacher, MaMngwevu, she kept saying, we need to do this ceremony for you, this eldership ceremony. And so we managed to do it last year. We did it, and it lasted for about 3 weeks. It was very in-depth, and then I was made an elder. An elder is called Liqliqa Elikulu, which means Sangoma elder. And it's a mark of attainment in your practice as a Sangoma. And it's no guarantee that when you're Sangoma, you're going to be given that mantle of attainment to be an elder. So it's a great honor, and it's not something that I expected. And so it was amazing because in 2007, I finished my Sangoma training in the Xhosa tradition. And many people came from all different parts of South Africa and the Eastern Cape. And some of those people I didn't see for a number of years afterwards. And I'm pleased to say that last year in April, when they made me an elder, so many people who I hadn't seen in so many years, they turned up. They turned up for the ceremony, and I was very humbled and very moved to see all these old friends and familiar faces coming to support my my new eldership in the tribe, in the tradition.
I mean, I love the way that that's organized by the tribe. I'm trying to think of, I mean, and you did mention in the note, you know, the system of transmission, which is, in particular, you talked about the Zen tradition, and spanning a couple of thousand years to the time of the Buddha, and in Hinduism, a shamanic system rooted in lineage. So I'm just trying to think, okay, what about me? What about our little legacy? And then I, you know, one of the main things I've been doing, not one of the many main things I've been doing, is documenting the mentors that we had when we were with Neem Karoli Baba in the early 70s. And as I read this, I thought, wow, this is really true to the tradition you're in, to Zen, to any of these traditions. Just Maharaji had, Neem Karoli Baba did not have any, geez, I don't even know how to call it, any guidelines in any way of anything, because he would say something to somebody that was completely opposite to somebody else. And so it was a little bit difficult. But the reality is we would not have gotten along without these elders, these mentors that we had. We had several of them. And so I think this is going on. We're actually thinking of it now that we're getting older, the people that were with Neem Karoli Baba back in that day. Okay, what are we doing to help open up the doorways for people to be able to share in what this legacy is? And I'm assuming that because of the structure of the tribe, this is made manifest in a very clear way, right?
Yes, you know, the tradition in the Xhosa culture is such that when someone does what's called the bone ceremony or the ancestral ceremony, and they put some white beads around your neck, and they do this particular, you know, it's a particular ceremony to this eldership. So once someone has those beads, then they are able to hold ceremony in their families. So it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has to be a sangoma, but it is a medicine ceremony or traditional healing ceremony. So when someone has those beads, and then there's maybe sickness in their family or there's struggle in the extended family, then they have that mark of attainment by the culture and the tradition that they are now allowed to host particular kinds of ceremonies to bring healing from the ancestral world into the world of the living. And for those people who aren't aware of some of the language I use in terms of ancestor, you could say spirit guides or the wisdom keepers, bringing them in, and you have that mark of approval from the culture.
How do you equate spirit guides to ancestors? You know, I've always had questions around ancestors. I mean, I totally, of course, intellectually understand what we're speaking to, but in practical application, that I don't think I've really found my way through there. So maybe talk about what that really is and how practically it is so meaningful for anybody.
So when we talk about ancestors, think of a tree. If a tree wants to grow tall, a tree has to connect with its roots. Once it connects with its roots, it's giving itself the facility to get stronger, but also to grow taller. Now, in terms of the shamanic world, not just in South Africa, but you could say worldwide, but I can talk with a lot of authority in terms of South Africa. If, let's say, you want to connect with, let's say, Niyam Karali Baba's lineage, or I want to connect with Ram Dass's teachings, and I want to go to the next level. As a Sangoma or as a traditional African person, the first thing I'm encouraged to do is to honor my own blood ancestors. And the reason is because we see the doorway of your connection as a human being to the spirit world. That doorway, like when you're entering a doorway, you do a bow, and you do the bow to the mother's lineage and the father's lineage. So what's holding that doorway is my own unique connection to the human race, and that rests on the shoulders of my biological ancestry. So I came into this world through my mother and father, through that bloodline. And when I want to connect to the dream time or the spirit world, whether it's yoga or Buddhism or any of those, you could say, adopted lineages or spiritual lineages, then it's encouraged for us just to make a bow and just to say some kind words to my biological ancestors, because without them, I wouldn't be here. Now, with a lot of Westerners, they do struggle with this, and the reason is because of the drama of colonialism, and also the drama of their own birthright and what's happened to them with their families. But when we're working with ancestors, we don't go into the personality, and it's not a personality contest in terms of who's good and who's bad. When we are connecting with ancestors, we are connecting with them beyond judgment and beyond good and bad deeds. So even if you're related to people historically who did a lot of bad deeds, let's say Stalin or Hitler, you would still connect with that ancestry, but not with their behavior. So a core part of this is to connect. I always say if there's a difficult ancestor or there's been some darkness in the family line, then it's important to when you're welcoming in your ancestors, to envisage them as 6-month-old children with a shining light of consciousness. We say Kanya. Kanya is a Xhosa and Zulu word, which means shining. So we say that is what you're welcoming in. You're welcoming in the Kanya, the consciousness of that human, of that human consciousness that has been passed on to you. So if there's struggles in the family, then you say the name of your ancestor, imagining that they are 6-month-old children, and you're welcoming that essence in. Now, if there has been badness in the family of recent generations, like let's say Hitler, for example, and suddenly you realize I'm related and you're still honoring that family line, then you can do some reconciliation to help clean that family line. And then you speak on behalf of the family and say, I'm very sorry about what my uncle did, or my father, or my grandfather, and I'd like to start an NGO or start some kind of prayer or ceremony to ask for forgiveness. And in that way, you help to bring consciousness to what happened, but you also help to bring a reconciliation. So there was a wonderful story, actually. There's many stories around ancestors, and there's one story in particular that I really love, and it was a recent story in the Mail and Guardian. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this in one of our previous podcasts, but this lady was she came from a good family, and she was a journalist, and she wanted to write a story about her family, and she was so proud of them and all their achievements. And she started to do some research, and then lo and behold, she found out that her great-great-grandfather, who was reputed to be a well-known philanthropist, she found out that he was actually, his money and the wealth of the family actually came because he had been a slave trader. He had been a slave trader, and it was a terrible experience for her to research this. And she called on all her family members together, and she said, all the wealth we have right now, and they were very upper class, very, very wealthy, she says it's all resting on because of this particular ancestor. And they were, oh yes, everyone said, yes, we know he was an amazing philanthropist and we're very proud of him. And she said, well, today I want to show you the research that I've done. So she had a whole meeting with the family. She showed the research. She showed that he had actually been this terrible slave trader. And then she said to her family members, we have to do something. We have to do something. So they all agreed, fortunately, and they went to the Caribbean, and they went to where he started his slave trade business, and they offered to start an NGO to help people who were struggling in that country. And they made a public statement about their grandfather and what she had found out. And she was very brave, I thought. And but it's a story about ancestors and how we can help clean and clear a family line. But we can't do anything about the behavior of some of our ancestors. But we can also not be afraid. We can't be afraid of who we are.
Yeah. Well, how about if you take it down halfway from Hitler to, hey, are just regular families which have potentially, for many people, there's destructive stuff has gone on by mothers and fathers, or grandfathers for that matter, not to this extent, slave trading or anything like that, or harming people, but just somebody, I'm personally extraordinarily fortunate in that my father came, who I had who was disturbing. He disturbed me, and that was enough for me to say, okay, I don't know if I'll ever get through this with him, He had PTSD from the war and all of that kind of thing, and angry and just really not centered in any place where he had any awareness of what was happening to him, and as a result, what he was laying on other people. I got lucky because he came to India, and you've heard this story. Maharaji told me to give him acid, and he did, and it changed his life. And seeing Neem Karoli Baba as well. I had to, though. I did have to do, I'm remembering now, I did have to do something because all of the stuff that happened before that, so much anger and so much isolation that I felt because of this. And I thought, okay, well, now, my father's okay, we're okay. We still did, get into little bouts, shall we say? Yeah. So one day, actually in the Taos temple, where we have Hanuman up in Taos, New Mexico.
Yeah.
He said to me, "Are we okay?" It was, and now, I think back, that was my opportunity to do what you have been suggesting, which is send love into a very difficult situation, even though at that point things had changed so radically for the best. And I said, "Yes, Dad, we're fine." And I can relate. That's a way I can relate with what you're speaking to around ancestors.
And then it's important when you're doing ancestral practice to not think small. So in the African system, we think of ancestors, we think of the baobab tree that can live for over 2,000 years. So when you're really doing your practice, you want to see a stream of consciousness going through you in terms of your ancestral names, and you want to go back in time. You want to really stretch to about 2,000 years. You don't want to think 30 years or 40 years or up until the Second World War or the First World War. You want to go back. You want to really go back in time, because when you do that, then you are connecting to the good and the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, the intelligent and the struggles. You connect to your humanity and you connect to other people's humanity. So we are encouraged in the Xhosa tradition, the tradition of Nelson Mandela, we are encouraged to stretch far back when we are connecting with our ancestors. And they say in the Xhosa tradition amongst my elders that when people are calling in the names of their ancestors and they're saying the names on the sacred land, they say that we are all related. So when we can look into the mirror and welcome in our ancestors with grace and kindness, then there's no reason to berate and demonize another person from another culture.
Mm. Okay, but wait, going back beyond your grandpa, seems to, I don't, how do we do that? I mean, what are you speaking to there? Going back and back, thousands of years.
Well, you say the names of your ancestors. So if you know the different surnames, then you would say those names. And even if you don't, then you would just have that in your mind that you're stretching yourself in terms of your consciousness back, in terms of welcoming in your ancestors, going back in time. And this is where we have to do the work. And in Xhosa, they call this ancestral work, we actually called umsebenzi when we're doing these ceremonies. And the word umsebenzi literally means work. So it's recognized that this is work that we have to do on ourselves. And it's work not just for us. We are doing this work to actually help our community. Because if someone is stuck in judgment and anger and fear and hatred because of their ancestors, then they are going to put that into the human race and into their community. So we say that it's very important that people get to that place of harmony and respect and honoring for their own ancestors. And if they can't do that, then that's where the work is for them.
Mm. Do you use this practice, John, on a daily basis?
Yeah, I do this. Yeah, I mean, I remember for myself, struggling to in the beginning to honor and praise my own blood ancestors because of being brought up in apartheid, and then noticing how African people and black people were treated in the 70s, and I felt so ashamed to have white skin. I felt so ashamed.
Oh, really?
And
wow.
And then when I started my apprenticeship in the early 90s, and in the mid-90s, Nelson Mandela had been released from jail, and he was just about to become the president of South Africa. And then I was invited to become an apprentice Sangoma in this Xhosa family, and they invited me in. And I felt really embarrassed and ashamed because I was the only white Sangoma apprentice in the whole area.
Really?
And they were talking about, like a 100-kilometer radius, And for the first few years, I was doing the practice, and I was honoring my teacher and her lineage, and I would do the ngula. Ngula is what's called the praise singing, where you sing the names of the ancestors in the lineage. So it was easy for me to go and Nguli Zinyanya, Nguli Tikwam, MaMngwevu, Nguli Sugwini, Ngula Badashi, Ngula Banabadala, Ngula Ndietandaza, Tsamago, Makos Magulu, Tsamago, and Ngula Ndietandaza. It was easy for me to honor and praise the names of my teacher MaMngwevu and her husband Tadasugwini and their lineage. I learned it, I could do it, and then right at the end, I would go and John Lockley. I'd honor and praise my own ancestors. And I was doing this for about 3 or 4 years, and then there was a turning point. Something happened where I started the prayers. Instead of honoring my teacher and her husband in the beginning, I started the prayers by honoring my mother and father's lineage and my own blood ancestral family. And then I followed up their names with then honoring my teacher and her husband. And while I did this, I was looking at my teacher's husband's face, Tadasugwini, and he was looking, and his whole face was beatific, and he was smiling, and he was almost crying, and he was going, Kamagu, which means blessings upon you, to a Sangoma, you go Kamagu. And I finished my praise singing, which is welcoming in the ancestors. And then he said to me, Namhlanje, wena linkulu. He looked at me and he pointed to me and he said, come, I want to speak to you. And he said to me, today you are a senior Sangoma. Today you are a real Sangoma. And I said, and he was just smiling. And I said, why is that, Father? What's changed? He said, today you started the praise and the singing to the ancestors by welcoming in your mother and father first. And he said, we know that you love us. We know that you honor and respect us. And we feel your love. However, he said, you are a child of your mother and father's lineage, of that family. And today, you honored them in the old way. Today, my heart is singing. Today, wena liqhinkulu. today you are a senior Sangoma.
Wow.
And from that point, I had what you could call, like a lot of Westerners, a lot of Caucasian people who have experienced apartheid or colonialism, I would have, feeling ashamed of the color of my skin. I felt that so strongly. And I had what you could call low spiritual self-esteem, where I'd put my friends and my colleagues on a pedestal thinking they knew more than me because they didn't experience the shame of their ancestors. But from that point, when I could honor my ancestors with integrity and dignity, that spiritual low self-esteem that I may have experienced before just started to evaporate. And I just started to accept myself with the color of my white skin from that point on.
Wild reversal of when we look at the point of view from this side of the world, Oh my God. Ubuntu, which is, I think it's a word that many people know and have heard. And how about going into that a little bit and, just defining that? We've done it before, but it bears repetition. Ubuntu.
Ubuntu, which means the depth of humanity. So these are the teachings that was popularized by Nelson Mandela in the 90s and 2000s, and also by Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Yeah.
And both of them are Xhosa men. Both of them are raised in the Xhosa system of the culture in South Africa. And Ubuntu is an old Southern African philosophy that speaks about humanity, but it speaks about a circle of man or a collective consciousness of humanity. So it's actually very deep. So Ubuntu means I am what I am because of who we all are. So if someone is suffering, it says we are all suffering. If there's prejudice in the community, then we are all experiencing that. If people have an enlightenment experience, then we are all experiencing that. So this whole idea of Ubuntu, I am what I am because of who we all are, also puts responsibility on the individuals in that circle to kind of shape up and wise up and do their practice in terms of connecting with their ancestors and their humanity. So to feed that Ubuntu circle, to make that circle of humanity stronger, they say the impetus and the responsibility is on each person in that circle, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're famous or not, whether you're man, woman, or child. They say the responsibility is for each human being in that circle to connect to their roots, to connect to that essence of Kanya, the essence of their human spirit and soul. And the way we do that in the culture is to remember. We say ukukumbula, to remember who you are and where you come from, to remember your ancestry, and to remember your ancestors with kindness, and to sing their names, to remember them. And as you do that, your humanity and your consciousness gets stronger. And I remember one day with one of my elders, I was so lucky to spend many years with him, and he was just like Nelson Mandela. In fact, his name was Mtutuzeli. That's his Xhosa name. And in English, his name means the comforter. Now, he was an incredible elder, and he survived a lot of poverty in his life, and he managed to educate his children, and one of his children actually became a well-known lawyer. And so he was incredible, this man, Mtutuzeli. And he was so kind and so compassionate, but also very, very clear. And one day we were in the township together, and he would help me with translations of the deep Xhosa language, which is very deep and quite complicated. So he'd often explain certain concepts to me. And one day we were in my car and we were chatting, and people were walking past my car, and he said to me, "Cingo, ujonga bantu apa." He said, "John, look at all these people walking past us." And I'm going, "Ewe tata." "Yes, father." And he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "Well, I see a lot of people walking past." And he said, "Yes, there are a lot of people." He said, they may look like human beings, but not all of them are human beings. He said, to become a human being, you have to make a decision. He said, we are all born looking like human beings, but not everyone out there is a human being. He said, to become a human being properly, he said, you have to honor your ancestors. You have to welcome them in with grace and with kindness. And he said, you have to listen to your dreams and follow the wind of your spirit. And he said, now, for us, Xhosa people, he said to me, if we don't remember our dreams, you know what we have to do, Tringo. You know what we have to do. He looks at me and he says that. Oh, yeah, Tringo, you know what we have to do if we don't remember our dreams. And I said, Ewe Tata, yes, Father, I know, but tell me anyway. And he said, if we don't remember our dreams, we have to go to people like you, to sangomas, to help us remember our dreams, because if we are not connected to our dreams, we are not connected to our Ubuntu. We are not connected to our humanity. And we are not connected to our ancestors. But he said the first thing is, even if you are struggling to connect to your ancestors, the first thing is to make a decision to connect to your humanity, make a decision to connect to your roots, to your ancestors. And that in itself will start helping you connect to the pain and the grief of what it means to be a human being. And then Ubuntu can get stronger. So there is the teachings, but the teachings require responsibility, requires some kind of dedication and work, and it requires looking at your own shadow, your own pain and your own grief. And I'll just finish off the story of Ubuntu with a little story of Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela was brought up in a very traditional household in the Xhosa way, because his father was an advisor and spokesman to the prince of the Xhosa nation. And when his father died, the prince called him to be brought up with his son so that he could become the advisor to the royal household of the Xhosa nation. And so Nelson Mandela used to watch and used to see how the prince and the royal family dealt with people with dignity and with respect and with Ubuntu. And then one day, Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for 27 years. And one day when he was in prison, I think he had been in prison maybe for anything from 5 to 10 years. There was a turning point for him in terms of him experiencing his shadow. And he said in his autobiography, he was experiencing a lot of anger and a lot of hatred. And he was directing it towards white people because of what he had gone through, and because he had, he was in prison and incarcerated for unjust reasons. So it made sense that he was angry. And but one day, before he went to sleep, this little voice said to him, Nelson, be careful, this anger is going to kill you. You need to befriend the enemy. You need to befriend the enemy. And then he went to sleep, and when he woke up the next morning, that voice spoke to him again, and it said, Nelson, you need to befriend the enemy. You need to befriend your own anger. And at that moment, the jailer opened the door, and the jailer was a young white guy, and Nelson Mandela still had all that anger inside of him, and he said to the young jailer, what made you become a jailer? And he said to him, I had no choice. He said, what do you mean you had no choice? Because in his mind, he said every white person had a choice, much more than black people in that time. And he said, my father died when I was very young, and I've got a lot of brothers and sisters, and I was the oldest, and I was only 14, and I had to drop out of school to support my family and help my mother. And the only job that would take me at such a young age was the prison service. So they took me, and I was able to support my family and help my mother. And Nelson Mandela, he said in that moment, for the first time in his life, he started to feel some compassion towards a white person, because his father had also died at a young age, but he was brought up in the royal family of the Xhosa nation, and he went to a private school, and he was well looked after. So a little bit of compassion reared its head inside of him, and then he said to him, this young jailer, he said to him, "And whereabout were you brought up? Whereabout did you have this your home?" And he said, "Well, we had a farm in the Eastern Cape." And he said, "Eastern Cape?" He said, "Oh, yes, Xhosa. Do you speak Xhosa?" And he said, "Ewe, diathetha isiXhosa." He said, "Yes, I speak the language." Then the next thing they started speaking Nelson Mandela's mother tongue, which is the Xhosa language. And so, long story short, when Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa, sitting with him was this young jailer who became one of his best friends. And this was a wonderful story of reconciliation and also of Ubuntu, because part of Ubuntu is facing your own shadow and facing your own anger and grief. And he realized in that moment, when he had that vision or that voice speaking to him, that it was true that this anger was going to kill him if he didn't do something about it. And then he said in his autobiography, what you see and what you hear is not always the truth. You have to find that truth for yourself.
Very Buddhist, actually.
Very. So these old systems on wisdom keepers, they are all very, very similar because the root of it is the same. The root of it is our connection to Mother Earth, our connection to our people and our ancestors, and our connection to nature.
Yeah. And I think that one of the most important things, we know it's very difficult here in this country right now, in America. And how do we find a way through that can help people transform? I've mentioned this now in quite a few podcasts, but I found His Holiness the Dalai Lama has a prayer when he wakes up in the morning, and it starts out with, "I remind myself nothing exists as it appears." I mean, that's a huge statement. Nothing exists as it appears. And he said, everybody wants to be happy, but everybody goes through suffering. And we have to, he didn't say we have to, he doesn't speak like that, but now time to generate compassion to help people overcome their negative emotions. So it's what a great prayer. Yeah, I've been doing it now every day. I mean, it's just kind of amazing. But relating that to the thing that, in my mind, has the most opportunity for us to help overcome or transform negative energy in general, negative emotions and so on, is coming together with each other in community. And as Ram Dass said, and by the way, I'm going to show you my T-shirt. He said, we're all just walking each other home. Okay. I didn't plan this, okay? I did not plan this. But if you're on YouTube, you can see we're all just walking each other home, which is, I'd say, one of Ram Dass in particular's most essential teaching. And it's around community and Ubuntu.
That
really.
is Ubuntu.
Yeah, it is Ubuntu.
That's Ubuntu.
Yeah. That's
Ubuntu. I mean, Ubuntu is found all over the world. It's not just South Africa. It's just verbalized and vocalized in this particular way in South Africa. But it's found wherever people coming together and holding each other and loving each other, and also recognizing each other's humanity and where they come from, their own ancestors. That's Ubuntu.
Yeah. And again, as you said earlier, there's difficult ancestors. For some reason in the West, it's very difficult for people to to really make it part of their people who are on the path, recognize that, the work that we have to do. And at the same time, it's difficult for Westerners who have been, we've grown up into the culture of separateness so profoundly. So, me, when I was a kid, it was, how do I get out of this? It was all, rebellion. I couldn't take it anymore. Fortunately, what happened to me. I met Ramdas when I was very young, or early 20s. But the way we've been speaking to ancestors, for me in particular, in this moment, I recalled that one story with my father, which made a huge difference for me. But I never could characterize it, contextualize it in the way that, you're speaking to it and I'm receiving it. And I suddenly, I think I start to get it a little bit, just a little bit.
And there's one aspect as you're talking that I just want to touch on, and it also touches on Ram Dass's teachings in Niyam Karali Baba. And there's two words that I want to talk about. The one is Tobela, and then Isipiwo or Kanya. Tobela means humility. So without Tobela, there's no grace. Without humility, then we can't connect to grace. We can't connect to the shining, the Kanya. So the practice of connecting to your ancestors is also the practice of connecting to humility, to know that no human being stands above another person or another human being in terms of being better, cleverer, more holy, more sacred, more good, more pure. Not one human being can stand above another human being. And that's the circle of Ubuntu, which says that we are all equal. Whether you are a homeless person on the street of New York or whether you are a CEO of a $1 trillion company, you are not better. You are the same. And this is what's hard for people to envisage. But when you work with ancestors and your mind goes back 2,000 years, you will feel Tobela, you will feel humility. And yes, it is a practice, and that's why we have to practice this. And you see this in Buddhism, and you see this in Hinduism, and you see it in the old cultures, which is very shamanic in terms of yoga and Buddhism. And I remember when I was training in a temple in South Korea with the possibility of becoming a Zen monk, and I did the 100-day retreat, which was a prerequisite to be considered to become a monk. You had to do the 100-day retreat, and then they would check you out and interview you before they would invite you in. And I was very, very lucky because I went through that process, and then the Grand Master at the time, Sung San, invited me to become his student, to become a monk. And in that moment, I said to him, no, because I realized I had to go back to South Africa, vote for Nelson Mandela, and explore this shamanic calling, this Sangoma calling. But one of the things I loved about Buddhism, and I still do, is that practice of Tobela, the practice of humility. So we will bow. We will do 108 bows in the morning. And when you're doing the bows, the teachers, the shamans, the Zen masters, and the other monks would encourage us to let our story go. I said, when you're bowing, you are bowing to the universe. You are letting yourself go. And one of the things I love in terms of the Eastern version of Buddhism, in terms of, as we know, Buddhism has 3 jewels, which is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Now, in the East, the Sangha is your community, but it's not just the community of practitioners, of Buddhist practitioners and those that you meditate with. The Sangha is also your own ancestors. So when we moved with the Zen circle, we moved from South Korea to Singapore to open up a Zen center in Singapore with my Zen masters. I remember going to one of the local Buddhist temples and noticing this one man doing 3 bows to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then speaking to the community members afterwards. And then I realized that when he was bowing to the Sangha, he was also bowing to his ancestors. And this is what they shared with me. So when you bow to your ancestors, you're not bowing to their behavior. You are bowing to the seed of consciousness and humanity that they have passed on to you. And when you feel that and you engage with all the suffering that your ancestors went through, and the death and the mayhem and the illnesses and the suffering, and then you find it within yourself to say thank you, then that seed of Thobela, the seed of humility, will start inside of you. And then that can be the very start of your spiritual calling, because without humility, grace can't come into your life. And grace is epiphany, grace is dreams, grace is where you get led on a mystical road. And when you meet those folks of you who've met Ram Dass, you feel Thobela, you feel humility with him. You know, he doesn't stand above you, and he looks at you, he listens to you. And that humility is what is the foundation stone to any spiritual practice. But some of us, I mean, all of us, we have to practice that. So the practice of humility is doing 108 bows in the Buddhist context. In the yogic way, it's doing chants and doing your mala beads like ram, ram, ram. And in the shamanic world, it is honoring your ancestors, not because you're standing above people, but because without them, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. It's also interesting, you mentioned in the note you sent me, you talked about unique medicine of North America.
Yes.
So we do have a couple of things. I mean, you know, and one is hospitality, generosity of spirit. And the other one is creativity. Talk about that a little bit in terms of our journey.
Yes, you know, when I spoke to you about doing this podcast, I wanted to talk about these two medicines of the United States or North America that I experienced personally. And I felt it was important because of all the negativity, all the shaming, all the sadness, all the grief. And I thought, you know, any country in the world goes through the shadow, goes through the dark times of the spirit of the community. Every single country known to man. But what's very important when we're going through dark times is also to recognize the medicine that we have as a community. You know, like in South Africa, we went through very dark time, and we had to recognize during those dark moments the medicine that we have in South Africa. So I just wanted to hold a mirror to folks who are struggling right now, and particularly in the United States. In my experience of traveling and touring for about 10 years, and then that's how I ended up meeting Ram Dass. You know, it was towards the end of that 10-year cycle. And what I found in the US was incredible hospitality. You know, people let me stay in their homes, and some of them didn't even know me. They just heard about me, and they let me stay in their homes, and they fed me, they looked after me, they listened to me, they held me, you know, and then they also got their friends to come and support my Dharma work, you know, my teachings. And I was absolutely blown away by that. I felt so humbled by that. And it didn't happen once or twice. It happened for 10 years. And I remember one time I was feeling I need to bring these teachings out in the world, and I was feeling I would like to write a book. And I didn't know how to go about it. And I remember I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was going for a walk, and I was looking up, and I was just saw all these eagles. And then next to the house where I was staying were these deer. They used to come underneath the house, and they had a little baby deer. And I just remember doing these Qigong exercises and meditations outside. And I just remember feeling this place is so creative. There's something in the air that's different from my experience, let's say, living in South Africa or living in Ireland. There's something like it's almost tangible, this feeling of creativity. But creativity, as we know, can go in any direction. You can use creativity for good or for bad, just like any medicine. But I felt that one of the medicines in the US is the medicine of communication. is the throat chakra, the medicine of communication. And it's so strong in the US in terms of any old culture to communicate the teachings. People would always go through the US. They went from India to the US. They came from Japan, and they came from Southeast Asia, and they brought spiritual teachings to the US, and then it was transmitted around the world. Same with my Zen master. He came from the US to South Africa and then South Korea. And so I felt all of that, and I just felt, there's something very powerful and beautiful about a place that has this exuberance and creativity, and especially to do with communication. And so those two medicines, we can never forget, no matter how dark and difficult things are, that medicine of hospitality and creativity, in particular communication.
Talk about hospitality, we were told by Maharaji, the uninvited guests to your house. In other words, somebody just pops up, you didn't invite them, you may not even know them, but you invite them in. That's worth 100 sacrificial fires the merit of.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, that's Ubuntu again. That's Ubuntu in South Africa. Going into the 1800s, people who washed up on the shores of South Africa in the Eastern Cape, they would automatically be absorbed into the tribe, because they would say, this person has got red blood like us. They're a member of the human race, and we have to show Ubuntu to them. So that's why the culture actually grew, and it got deeper, and you would see people from different cultures that got shipwrecked on the coast of the Eastern Cape, and they would just be absorbed into the culture.
Another Neem Karoli Baba statement that you just spoke to more than once in this in the last hour. The same blood runs through all of our veins. He was just sitting around him one day, and Ramdas was upset because he didn't feel he was pure enough to even be there, and he said so. Maharaji made him stand up and twirl around, and he looked at him. He said, "I don't know. You seem okay. I don't see anything, any problem." And then he started talking about Christ, and ended with that. He did that just a couple of times while we were with him, where everything stopped. The stillness was extraordinary. And that's when he said, the same blood runs through all of our veins. And no matter, he spent a lot of the decades related to the caste system, trying to break the caste system. And that was part of what he was speaking to at that time. Same blood.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So these old teachings, you could say the wisdom keepers of the human race, is what we call on. When we're calling on ancestors, we call on our own blood ancestors that we are directly connected to. And as we go down that line, we are then automatically welcoming in the teachings of what we call the wisdom keepers, which are those wisdom keepers of the human race. So this is fundamental, because as you show Thobela humility by welcoming in your blood ancestors, it might happen that you have a dream of Neem Karoli Baba, for example, but then you might say, but why did I have a dream of Neem Karoli Baba when I went to sleep honoring my own ancestors, but I didn't see them? I saw Neem Karoli Baba. Why, John? People ask me this, and I'll say, it's obvious. They'll say, why? And I said, because you showed Thobela, you showed humility, and you also showed gratitude for the gift of being human. You showed gratitude. And because of that, grace shone its light on you, and one of the wisdom keepers came to teach you.
Beautiful. Oh, so great, John. All right, well, we're at we need a few minutes here of a meditation through. John does beautiful chanting and drumming, so I'm going to let you take it over.
Yes, I think let's do a meditation to honor Neem Karoli Baba and Ramdas and the lineage of the Be Here Now network. and to celebrate the 10 years of bringing the voice of wisdom, the voice of love, the voice of Ubuntu, the voice of gratitude into the world. And so on that note, I'm just going to encourage each person who's listening to put their hand on their heart or their hand on their pulse point on their wrist so you can feel your own heartbeat. So wherever you are, whatever you're experiencing, know that you are a child of nature. You're a child of the Great One. The Great One has many names. Krishna, Utikro, Kamata, many different names. But know that you are a child of the Great One, the child of nature. And just close your eyes and feel your heartbeat and breathe into that pulse inside of you. And welcome in your own ancestors. Do a bow to your mother's lineage and a bow to your father's lineage, for the simple reason that the gift of life, the gift of humanity is being passed on to you through this particular line, this particular lineage. And don't judge your ancestors. Don't judge yourself. Just welcome them in and give thanks for the grace of life, of humanity that's been passed on to you through your ancestral lines. So breathe into that as you feeling your heartbeat. And if you're feeling judgment, then know that that's what you have to work with. And as we're doing this, we also welcome in and we give thanks to our spiritual ancestors, our adopted ancestors. And in this moment, we're doing that in terms of the line of Niyam Karali Baba and Ramdas, and the Be Here Now network, and also of my beloved Xhosa family, MaMngwevu, the Sangoma from South Africa. So I'm going to play my drum and do a chant, and while I'm doing that, just breathe into your own heartbeat, breathe into your own connection to your red blood and your humanity. Oh, vulenle la vazalibamo, vulenle la vazalibamo, oh, myange, 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 oh, myange, myange. Tamagwini myange, tamagwini myange, oh, myange, 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 oh, myange, myange. Oh, volenle la vazalibamo, volenle la vazalibamo, volenle la vazalibamo, volenle la vazalibamo, myange, 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 oh, myange, myange. Oh, tamagwini abazalibamo, tamagwini abazalibamo, tamagwini abazalibamo, tamagwini abazalibamo, myange, 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 oh, myange, myange. Siyabolela bana bedala Xamagu, siyabolela nkulunkulu Xamagu, siyabolela isinyanya Xamagu, sithi Xamagu amakhosi makhulu, vulenlela bana bedala Xamagu. Myange, 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 oh, myange, myange. Now we're just placing your hand on your heart. Breathe in the strength of the human race coming from your ancestors. And when you breathe out, send love to your family line. Send gratitude for being alive. Not because you want something from your ancestors, but just a sign of just gratitude, saying thank you. And then we reach up We say thank you to life, to consciousness, to the Great Spirit. MaMngwevu, we say thank you. With grace, with gratitude, we say thank you. Siyabonga, Nkosi yami, Amaku. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and blessings to the Be Here Now network,
Mm-hmm.
to Raghu, to his team, to Ramdas on the other side.
Mm.
Blessings.
Gratitude, well, humility, gratitude, generosity. These are good themes for us to work on. Yeah? Thanks so much, John. As usual, so great to get with you. The magic of technology. This is the positive side of it, right?
Yeah, that's the positive to creativity. So thank you.
Yeah,
It's
right.
been wonderful.
Yeah. So everybody, go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling. In the show notes, we'll have a way for you to get in touch with John and see what he's doing. He does retreats everywhere, across continents, really. And I'm so happy that this moment arrived. We were fortunate, John. So again, thank you for being here, and everybody, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Rob.